These days I try not to get into too many arguments online. Not a particularly fruitful endeavor there. But, being a young man once, I just figured I could change people's minds, and that turns out that is not true, and generally speaking is not an evidence-based way to go about things. But anyway, I do remember disagreeing with somebody at one point and mentioning something to the effect of we need to weigh the consequences against the actions before we make a firm decision on something. And somebody else poked their head in and literally said, if I'm remembering the words correctly, and trust me, the paraphrase is not far off, it said, I don't think that consequences are a good reason not to do something. Here's the fact, here's something that is just kind of a fact of life. When it comes to life, when it comes to progress and adaptation and evolution and all that, competition and consequences absolutely matter. Because competition and consequences tell us what's working, what's not, and how to move forward. If you are able to operate with impunity, meaning if you are able to operate without the immediate consequences of your actions being felt, then you are going to be getting a lot of false positives and potentially false negatives as well for whatever it is you're trying to do. And when you allow people, entities, to compete with one another for resources, market share, compete with each other for philosophical ideas and whatnot, what you end up doing is you create an environment where people have to constantly test and innovate and reconfirm what they know, what they believe, how they operate, in order to keep being of value. You see, this concept of being of value is actually a pretty important one. All relationships are highly transactional. They might not be purely transactional, but they're very highly transactional. And there is very, very seldomly ever interaction that is done solely for the sake of the other, without there being some sort of return, even if only perceived, psychological, whatever, for the self. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, it is one of those kind of facts of nature thing. It's hard to call nature wrong, because, well, nature's not operating by a handbook. I mean, maybe you believe in some kind of divine force or something, and maybe nature can be wrong in that case, but that doesn't sound right either. But the fact is that there are going to be things in nature that are inherently more valuable than others in a given context. We always have to put things in context. Without context, none of it matters. And so the other side of it is, the other side of this competition thing is, well, if there is no competition, how do you get progress and everything? And that's consequences. Consequences, right? And remember, consequence, just literally break it down, consequence. After a series of things, right? What you were talking about is something that happens as a response to something else happening. That's all consequence means. Now, we have often taken consequence to mean something negative, but the positive results of a series of actions or whatever would also be consequences by the strict, literal, technical definition. And so understanding how A plus B equals C, right? The equals C part is the consequences. Understanding how that works is important, just as much as having competing forces forcing constant adaptation. I remember somebody saying that, people only are talking about competition where nobody wins, and that's not what we're talking about here. The concept is, one, it's hard for anybody to win at life. Nobody gets out of here alive. But beyond that, it's the concept that we're all just kind of existing. We are all looking for resources, progress, whatever other psychological drives that we have, whether they're rational or not. All of that stuff we're in constant contest for, because the fact is that the resources to get us where we want to get are in fact limited, and they require, generally speaking, work to get, unless you have a serious dose of luck. They require work to get. And so, this very concept that you need to be able to get in there and work and compete for resources. You need to be able to find alternate solutions when you can't get resources. Look at nutrition. Such a great example. Different cultures across the globe have had different resources available, and while all humans share a fundamentally similar biology, you will find different people in different regions have different slight adaptations. You may have heard about like the Japanese having a specific enzyme that helps them break down starch better because of such a consistently rice-heavy diet. Northern Europeans tend to be more lactose tolerant because being in the cold climates, dairy farming was actually a pretty important thing to help us survive when we have massive cold seasons that make hunting and foraging very, very difficult to pursue, if possible at all. And so when you find ways to compete, competing is not always even competing for the same resources. It is, in a sense, competing for life. You're just looking for ways to get what you need to get by, or to get to the next level, or whatever it is. And if you don't have the specific resources at hand, well, it turns out the way the universe works and the way the world works, there's a lot of workarounds, there's a lot of substitutions available, there's a lot of alternates available, and that creates some really interesting stuff. So, reducing competition, reducing people's ability to play off of each other and have battling ideas and having actual opposition, reducing people's ability to feel and experience consequences only actually hurts you as a human being. It interrupts your ability to actually manage and adapt and get through life. So we need to do what we can to promote, granted, healthy, moral, ethical competition. All those caveats are in there, but we should never ever be striving to remove consequences. Consequences give us information that is really, really necessary, and competition does the same. Yeah, that's where we're at. I will talk to you guys later. Good journey.